The sound of flesh striking leather echoed through the dimly lit training hall. In the center of the worn mat, a young woman moved with lethal precision, her form a blur of disciplined motion against the heavy punching bag. Her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, Emily Reed struck with the controlled power that came from years of rigorous training. Each punch, each kick, delivered with mathematical precision, nothing wasted, nothing for show. The industrial district of Greenfield was silent at this hour. Most businesses had closed hours ago, leaving this nondescript warehouse at the edge of town to its secret purpose. Inside, beyond the faded exterior and unassuming entrance, existed a training facility few knew about. Equipment that had seen years of use lined the walls. Weapons racks with practice knives and staffs conditioning tools that hadn't changed in centuries. And in the corner, a shrine to traditional martial arts with a framed photo of an older man in military dress uniform. Emily executed a flawless spinning back kick that would have incapacitated any attacker. At 20 years old, she carried herself with the controlled awareness of someone much older. Her movements reflected 12 years of dedicated practice, a lifetime for someone her age. Your technique is clean, but you're holding tension in your shoulders. The deep voice came from the doorway where Colonel Martin Harrison stood, arms crossed, his watchful eyes missing nothing. At 68, the former Delta Force operator moved with the same quiet efficiency that had kept him alive through 3 decades of special operations. His silver hair was still cut to military precision, and the scars on his weathered face told stories he rarely shared. My mind was somewhere else, Emily admitted, stepping back from the bow and bowing slightly, a gesture of respect ingrained since childhood. Harrison walked across the mat, his gait revealing the slight limp from an extraction operation in Fallujah that had ended his field career. "Tomorrow's the start of that Marine program at your college," he observed, reaching for the bag to steady it. "That's what's on your mind." Emily grabbed a towel, wiping sweat from her face. Her silence was answer enough. "Emily," Harrison said, his voice softening slightly, "you've been my student since you were 8 years old. You've mastered techniques that take most people a lifetime. You could knock down half those Marines without breaking a sweat." "That's not the problem," she replied quietly, beginning to unwrap the protective tape from her hands. "I don't want to stand out. I just want to get through the program, finish my degree, and become a police officer. No complications." Harrison studied her with eyes that had once tracked enemy movements across mountain ranges and desert plains. "Some battles find us whether we want them or not." The memory came unbidden to Emily's mind, her first day at elementary school in Oregon, 12 years ago. The taunts, the shoving in the hallway, coming home with bruises she tried to hide from her parents. Former police officers themselves, they had recognized the signs immediately. Her father's quiet fury, her mother's practical solution. She needs to learn to defend herself. That was how 8-year-old Emily had found herself in the same warehouse facing a much younger Colonel Harrison, who had just retired from active duty and opened this dojo. She remembered her fear of this tall, intimidating man with hard eyes, not realizing then that those eyes had seen too much death and that teaching her would become his path back to something resembling peace. "I know what you're thinking," Harrison said now, interrupting her memories. "You're remembering that scared little girl who first walked through that door." Emily nodded, rolling her shoulders to release the tension, and wondering how, after 12 years of training, I'm still afraid of being noticed. Harrison's expression rarely changed, but Emily had learned to read the subtle shifts. The slight softening around his eyes now conveyed understanding rather than judgment. "Fear isn't your enemy, Emily. It's just information. What matters is what you do with it." He walked to the wall, removing a wooden staff from the rack with practiced ease. Without warning, he tossed it toward Emily, who caught it reflexively, her body moving before her mind could process the action. "That," he said, pointing at her hands now gripping the staff in perfect position, "is what 12 years have given you. Not fearlessness, readiness." Emily twirled the staff, muscle memory taking over the wood, making a soft whistling sound as it cut through the air. For a moment, she let herself feel the confidence that came with skill earned through thousands of hours of practice. "I should get home," she said, finally returning the staff to the rack. "Early class tomorrow." Harrison nodded, watching as she gathered her things. "Emily," he called as she reached the door, "remember what I taught you about using your training." She turned, completing the familiar mantra, "True strength is not for domination but for protection. Not for personal glory, but for defending those who cannot defend themselves. Good, Harrison said, the ghost of a smile crossing his weathered face. Don't forget who you are. Silverwood Community College hummed with the usual morning activity. Students streamed through the modern campus buildings, backpacks slung over shoulders, coffee cups clutched in hands, conversations creating a background murmur that Emily Reed moved through like a shadow. Head slightly down, dark hair partially obscuring her face, she clutched her criminal justice textbooks against her chest like armor. To anyone watching, she was just another student, quiet, unremarkable, forgettable, exactly how she wanted it. The contrast between this Emily and the one who had executed perfect combat forms 12 hours earlier was striking. Here she kept her posture deliberately less confident, her movements smaller, her presence reduced. It had become second nature, this careful self-diminishment. Professor Martinez's criminal psychology class was Emily's favorite, a detailed exploration of the minds behind criminal behavior taught by a former FBI profiler who brought real-world experience to theoretical concepts. Emily took her usual seat in the back corner, positioning herself where she could observe everyone without being noticed. She opened her notebook, meticulous, detailed notes written in a precise hand that reflected her disciplined mind. The margins were filled with additional observations, connections between concepts, references to supplementary reading she'd done on her own time. While her classmates saw the quiet girl, they missed the sharp intelligence behind her silence. Before we begin today's lecture, Professor Martinez announced, silencing the morning chatter, I want to remind everyone about the special program starting this afternoon. The Marine Corps military police trainers will be conducting a 2-week workshop on defensive tactics and situation assessment. It's a rare opportunity to learn from active duty personnel with field experience. A ripple of interest moved through the classroom. Emily kept her expression neutral, though her heart rate increased slightly. She'd been both anticipating and dreading this program since it was announced. Attendance is mandatory for all criminal justice majors, Martinez continued. The techniques they'll be teaching have direct application to law enforcement careers. Gymnasium at 1400 hours, that's 2 p.m. for you civilians. Laughter rippled through the room. As class ended and students filed out, Emily overheard snippets of conversation about the upcoming program. Most reflected excitement, some nervousness about the physical requirements. But one voice rose above the others, confident and dismissive. Should be interesting to see who can keep up and who cracks under pressure, said Ryan Thompson, former high school football quarterback and self-appointed alpha male of the criminal justice program. At 23, he carried himself with the swagger of someone who'd never been told no. Some people aren't cut out for real police work. His gaze swept the departing students, briefly landing on Emily before dismissing her as unworthy of notice. She kept walking, face impassive, though she'd cataloged everything about him, the way he shifted his weight forward when speaking to intimidate, the practiced charm he turned on for professors, the calculated cruelty he reserved for those he considered beneath him. Emily had learned to read people as a survival mechanism long before she'd studied body language in her criminal psychology courses. Ryan Thompson was an open book to her, insecure beneath the bravado, dangerous because of it. In the quiet of the library during her free period, Emily found her usual secluded corner table and opened her laptop. Instead of reviewing notes, she pulled up an email from her mother, a retired police detective who now consulted on cold cases. Remember what matters in law enforcement, her mother had written. Not the swagger or the uniform, but the commitment to protect. The best officers I knew were often the quietest ones. They listened more than they talked. Your father and I are proud of the path you've chosen. Emily closed the email, thinking of her parents. They'd supported her martial arts training from the beginning, understanding it wasn't just about self-defense, but about confidence, discipline, focus. They knew about her dream to join the police force, but had no idea how advanced her combat training had become. Colonel Harrison had recognized her exceptional talent early, pushing her far beyond the typical student curriculum into specialized techniques and tactical applications. By 15, she had earned her black belt. By 18, she was assisting Harrison in teaching younger students. Now at 20, she had mastered techniques that many career military personnel never achieved, and no one at Silverwood College knew any of it. Emily closed her laptop, considering the afternoon ahead. 6 Marines would be on campus, teaching basic defensive tactics to students who mostly knew combat only from movies and video games. It should be simple enough to blend in to perform at an average level to remain unnoticed. But a quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning: nothing stays hidden forever. The industrial facility where Colonel Harrison trained his select students bore little resemblance to conventional martial arts dojos. Located in what had once been a machine shop, the 5,000 square foot space had been transformed through decades of purpose-driven modification. The main training floor was covered with impact-absorbing mats worn to a dull shine by thousands of falling bodies. One wall held traditional weapon staffs, practice knives, training swords, while another featured modern tactical gear, including body armor, dummy firearms for disarming practice, and specialized striking pads. In one corner stood a reinforced heavy bag that had survived 15 years of punishment. Beside it hung a speed bag installed at precise height and nearby a wooden Wing Chun dummy with arms positioned for blocking and striking drills. The far wall was lined with conditioning equipment, pull-up bars, climbing ropes, and weight racks. Harrison's office occupied a small room off the main floor. Inside, military memorabilia shared space with ancient martial arts scrolls, two traditions merged into a single philosophy of disciplined action. A glass case contained medals. Harrison never discussed photos of teams whose missions remained classified, and a folded American flag in a triangle display case. This was the world where Emily Reed truly existed, a place where her skills were acknowledged, her potential recognized. 3 nights a week, she transformed from the invisible college student into a martial artist whose abilities had long since surpassed most of Harrison's other students. Tonight, Harrison watched as Emily led a small group of younger students through basic forms. Her movements were precise, her instructions clear and patient. The children, ranging from 8 to 12, watched with focused attention that spoke to the respect she commanded. "Remember," Emily told a young girl struggling with a blocking technique, "power doesn't come from muscle. It comes from proper body alignment and timing." She demonstrated in slow motion, showing how the entire body contributed to what appeared to be a simple arm movement. Harrison observed silently from the edge of the mat. In another life, Emily might have been a formidable military asset. Her combination of physical skill, tactical intelligence, and calm under pressure was rare. But he understood her desire for a different path to protect her community, directly to serve, without the complications of war and its aftermath. As the junior class ended and the students bowed out, Harrison approached. "Your teaching has improved," he noted. From him, this qualified as effusive praise. "They're good kids," Emily replied, gathering training equipment. "Eager to learn." "Like you were," Harrison said. He hesitated, then added, "I saw the notification about the Marine program at your college. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez is leading it." Emily looked up sharply. "You know him?" Harrison nodded once. "Carlos Rodriguez. We served together in Iraq. Operation Phantom Fury 2004. He was a young Marine, then part of the unit my team was supporting. Good man, solid tactician." Emily absorbed this information, calculating its implications. "Will he recognize my name?" "No," Harrison assured her. "He wouldn't know about our connection." "But Emily bombing," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Rodriguez has a gift for identifying talent. He can spot trained fighters by how they carry themselves, how they move, how they observe. If you're determined to stay under the radar, you'll need to be very careful." Emily nodded, understanding the warning. "I've managed to keep my training private for 2 years at Silverwood. 2 weeks with the Marines shouldn't be different." Harrison's expression suggested he wasn't convinced, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he walked to his office, returning with a small book bound in faded leather. "This belonged to my first instructor," he said, handing it to Emily. "A master who taught that martial arts isn't about fighting, but about ending fights before they begin. About understanding conflict so deeply that you can dissolve it rather than engage it." Emily accepted the book, reverently recognizing it as one of Harrison's most prized possessions. "Why are you giving me this now?" Harrison's weathered face revealed nothing, but his eyes held unusual intensity. "Because sometimes the true test isn't whether you can win a fight, but whether you can choose the right moment to reveal your strength and the right reason." Later that evening, in her small off-campus apartment, Emily carefully placed Harrison's book on her nightstand. The walls of her bedroom told the story of her divided life. A framed criminal justice program certificate hung beside a discreet shadow box containing her martial arts ranks and achievements. A bookshelf held textbooks on law enforcement procedures alongside dog-eared volumes on combat philosophy and tactical applications. On her desk sat a photo of her parents at their joint retirement ceremony from the Portland Police Department, both in full-dress uniform, their expressions reflecting pride in decades of service. Beside it, a smaller frame held a picture of 12-year-old Emily with Colonel Harrison after her first tournament victory. Emily sat cross-legged on her bed reviewing the Marine program schedule she'd received by email. 2 weeks of intensive training covering everything from basic self-defense to tactical responses and threat assessment. For most students, it would be challenging new material. For Emily, it would be a daily exercise in restraint. She closed her eyes, practicing the meditation Harrison had taught her years ago. Her breathing slowed, her mind cleared of distractions, focusing on the mantra he had instilled. True strength knows when to remain hidden and when to reveal itself. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. When she opened her eyes again, her decision was made. She would participate in the Marine program as expected, performing at a level that wouldn't draw attention. She would maintain her invisibility as she had for the past 2 years. The path to her goals required patience, not recognition. But something in Harrison's warning lingered in her mind as she prepared for bed. The sense that events were aligning toward an inevitable confrontation, that the two halves of her life were drawing closer together despite her efforts to keep them separate. The following morning brought a sense of anticipation to Silverwood Community College. News of the Marines' arrival had spread across campus, generating curiosity even among students outside the criminal justice program. By noon, rumors circulated about the real-life heroes who would be conducting the special trainings. Emily observed the excitement from her customary distance. In the cafeteria, she sat alone at a corner table picking at a salad while reviewing notes for her afternoon class. From this vantage point, she could observe without being noticed, a habit developed through years of careful self-preservation. Across the room, Ryan Thompson held court at a large table surrounded by his usual followers. His voice carried above the general cafeteria noise as he regaled them with stories about his father's decorated police career and his own plans to surpass those achievements. "Dad says the department has gotten soft," Ryan announced, leaning back in his chair with casual arrogance. "Too much sensitivity training, not enough focus on real police work. When I get through the academy, I'll show them how it's done." His companions nodded appreciatively, particularly Marcus Peterson and Derek Walsh, former high school teammates who had followed Ryan into the criminal justice program. Neither possessed his charisma, but they amplified his opinions with loyal enthusiasm. Emily maintained her neutral expression, though internally she cataloged the flaws in Ryan's understanding of modern police work. His outdated perspective reflected dangerous misconceptions about authority and force. These were precisely the attitudes that created problems in law enforcement, the belief that power was the point rather than protection. As lunch period ended, Emily gathered her things to leave. She had nearly reached the exit when Ryan's voice rose again, this time clearly meant for her to hear. "Hey, Reed, ready for the Marines this afternoon? Might actually have to speak up for once, Reed." Emily paused briefly, calculating her options. Engaging would invite more attention. Ignoring him completely might escalate his behavior. She settled for a middle approach, a slight nod of acknowledgement without eye contact, then continued walking. Behind her, Ryan's laughter followed. $10 says she drops out before the week's over. Some people just don't have what it takes." Emily kept walking her pace, measured her expression unchanged. But beneath the careful exterior, something shifted, a quiet determination taking root. Not to prove Ryan wrong, but to remain true to her own path regardless of his provocations. In her ethics and criminal justice class, Professor Jensen was discussing the concept of necessary force, a topic that would connect directly to the Marine training program beginning that afternoon. "The question isn't simply whether force is justified," Jensen explained, pacing before the whiteboard covered in relevant case law citations, "but whether it's necessary, proportional, and applied with clear purpose. Remember, in law enforcement, force is a last resort, not a first response." Emily took detailed notes, appreciating Jensen's nuanced approach. This aligned with Harrison's teachings about combat, that the highest achievement wasn't winning fights, but preventing them through awareness, de-escalation, and strategic positioning. As class ended, Jensen reminded everyone about the Marine program. "This is a valuable opportunity to learn from professionals who understand the real-world application of the principles we discuss in class. I expect full participation and attention from all of you." Students filed out conversation focused on the upcoming session. Emily gathered her materials methodically in no rush to arrive early and draw attention. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed Sarah Wilson, a freshman who frequently sat near Emily in the library, being cornered by Marcus, one of Ryan's followers. "Come on, you should join us after the Marine thing," Marcus was saying, standing too close to Sarah, whose discomfort was evident in her rigid posture and averted eyes. "Ryan's dad has connections in the department. Good people to know if you're serious about law enforcement." I, I have to study," Sarah stammered, clutching her books tighter. "Maybe another time." Marcus leaned closer, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Playing hard to get. That's cute." Emily paused, assessing the situation. This wasn't her concern, wasn't her fight. Intervening would mean visibility she'd carefully avoided. Yet Harrison's voice echoed in her mind. True strength exists to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Before she could reconsider, Emily changed direction, walking directly toward the pair. "Sarah," she called, her voice carrying an authority she usually suppressed. "We have that study group starting in 5 minutes. Professor Martinez is waiting." Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to relief as she recognized the lifeline Emily had thrown. "Right, I almost forgot. We should hurry." Marcus stepped back, surprised both by Emily's intervention and by her tone so different from her usual silence. He recovered quickly, his expression hardening. "Didn't know you two were friends." "Criminal justice majors stick together," Emily replied evenly, meeting his gaze without wavering. "We should go, Sarah." As they walked away, Emily could feel Marcus watching them, knew this interaction would be reported back to Ryan. She had broken her own rule of invisibility, drawn attention she'd carefully avoided for 2 years. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly once they were safely around the corner. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Emily nodded, already recalibrating her approach for the coming days. One small action had changed the dynamic ripples that couldn't be recalled. "Be careful around Ryan's group," she advised. "They mistake intimidation for strength." Sarah studied Emily with new interest. "I've seen you in the library. You're always studying. Everyone says you're the quiet one, but just now, you sounded different." Emily offered a slight smile, revealing nothing. "Sometimes being quiet is just about waiting for something worth saying." She checked her watch, 45 minutes until the Marine program began. "I have some things to take care of before the session. Will you be okay?" Sarah nodded, a new confidence in her posture. "Yes, and maybe we could actually study together sometime. I'm struggling with criminology theory, and I've heard you have the highest grades in the program." This was exactly the kind of personal connection Emily had avoided, yet she found herself nodding. "Library Thursday evening. I'll be at the back table." As Emily walked away, she felt a shift in the carefully constructed balance of her life at Silverwood. One small act of intervention, one moment of revealing her true voice, had created possibilities she hadn't planned for: connections, visibility, complications. In the quiet of a restroom stall, Emily took out her phone and sent a text to Harrison. "Marines arrived today. Staying low profile may be harder than expected." His response came seconds later, as if he'd been waiting for her message. "Trust your instincts. They're better than most people's calculations." Emily took a deep breath, centering herself as Harrison had taught her. Whatever happened in the coming weeks, she would face it with the discipline and clarity he had instilled. The path forward might not be the one she had planned, but she would navigate it with the same precision she brought to everything else. At precisely 13:55 hours, 5 minutes before the scheduled start of the Marine training program, Emily Reed entered the gymnasium, timing her arrival to blend with the general flow of students, rather than standing out as either eagerly early or noticeably late. She chose a seat halfway up the bleachers, positioned where she would have clear sight lines without being prominently visible. The gymnasium had been transformed for the occasion. Training mats covered the central floor area, and several equipment racks held padded striking targets, practice batons, and protective gear. A projection screen had been set up at one end, presumably for tactical demonstrations or instructional videos. Students filled the bleachers in groups, conversation creating a steady buzz of anticipation. Ryan Thompson and his entourage claimed front row positions, his voice carrying as he shared opinions on military tactics with the authority of someone who had never experienced them firsthand. "My cousin was force recon," he was saying to anyone within earshot. Told me the hand-to-hand stuff they teach is light years beyond what civilians learn. Completely different level. Emily suppressed a small smile, knowing that military combatives, while effective, were often more basic than advanced civilian martial arts systems designed for quick learning and battlefield application, rather than the technical depth Harrison had taught her over 12 years. At exactly 1400 hours, the side door opened, and 6 Marines entered in formation. The gymnasium immediately fell silent, the sharp contrast between student casualness and military precision creating an instant atmosphere of authority. Leading the group was Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, a compact, powerfully built man in his late 30s whose bearing commanded attention without effort. Behind him came Gunnery Sergeant Diana Collins, whose steel gray eyes missed nothing as she scanned the assembled students. Corporal Michael Stevens, whose movements revealed specialized close-quarters combat training. Sergeant James Williams, whose watchful demeanor marked him as a security specialist. Lance Corporal Robert Johnson, who carried himself with the distinctive confidence of a weapons expert. And Private First Class Thomas Martinez, whose youth and enthusiasm suggested a recent graduate of advanced training. Their Desert Marpat uniforms were immaculate, their posture perfect, their presence transforming the college gymnasium into something closer to a military training facility through nothing more than their bearing. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice projecting without seeming to raise it, a skill developed through years of command positions. Good afternoon, I'm Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps Military Police. My team and I will be conducting your tactical training program over the next 2 weeks. His gaze swept across the students, assessing rather than merely observing. This isn't a movie or a video game. What we're teaching are real-world techniques that may someday save your life or the lives of others in law enforcement situations. He gestured to his team, introducing each Marine with their specialty and background. Emily noted the precision of his language, the economy of his movements, nothing wasted, nothing for show. This was a man who had seen actual combat, whose authority came from experience rather than position. Before we begin, Rodriguez continued, I want to establish something important. Respect is fundamental to everything we do in the Marines, and it will be fundamental to this program. Respect for the techniques, respect for your classmates, respect for yourselves and your future responsibilities as law enforcement officers. Emily observed the students around her. Most were listening attentively, clearly impressed by the Marines' presence. Ryan and his group maintained expressions of casual interest that didn't quite mask their eagerness to prove themselves. We'll start today with basic situational awareness and defensive positioning, Rodriguez explained. These fundamentals underpin everything else in tactical response. Without proper awareness, all the fighting techniques in the world won't save you. He called for the students to move down to the mats, organizing them into rows with space to practice individual techniques. Emily positioned herself in the middle of the back row, visible enough to participate properly but not prominently placed. Gunnery Sergeant Collins took the lead for this segment, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to training recruits under pressure. Situational awareness begins before any physical confrontation. Your most important weapons aren't your hands or your firearm, it's your eyes and mind. She demonstrated proper scanning techniques, explaining how to continuously assess surroundings without appearing obvious. Predators look for prey who aren't paying attention. Whether you're dealing with criminals or battlefield threats, the principle is the same. Be aware, be alert without telegraphing your vigilance. As Collins walked the students through basic exercises in threat assessment, Emily performed at precisely the level expected of a reasonably attentive student, no better, no worse. She deliberately incorporated small errors that a novice would make, careful not to reveal the trained awareness Harrison had drilled into her for years. After 30 minutes of awareness drills, Rodriguez called for volunteers to demonstrate reactive positioning, the foundation of defensive techniques. Ryan's hand shot up immediately, followed by several of his friends. We've got an eager participant, Rodriguez noted with a neutral expression. Step forward. Ryan moved to the center mat, his swagger unmistakable as he faced the staff sergeant. Emily noticed Rodriguez's almost imperceptible assessment, the slight narrowing of eyes that evaluated Ryan's posture, balance, and attitude in seconds. Attack me, Rodriguez instructed. Try to grab me in any way you choose. Ryan grinned, clearly relishing the opportunity to display his athletic abilities. He lunged forward with surprising speed and attempting to tackle Rodriguez at the waist, a movement that might have worked in football but proved completely ineffective against the Marine. With minimal movement, Rodriguez shifted his weight, redirected Ryan's momentum, and sent him stumbling past, maintaining his own balanced position throughout. There was nothing showy about the technique, just efficient, effective movement. "This is redirection," Rodriguez explained to the watching students as Ryan regained his balance, "using your attacker's momentum against them while maintaining your own center of gravity. Notice I didn't have to be stronger than him, just more balanced and aware." He had Ryan attack several more times, each attempt ending with similar results. Ryan increasingly frustrated Rodriguez, calmly demonstrating principles of defensive positioning. Throughout, the staff sergeant remained professional, offering constructive feedback rather than emphasizing Ryan's failures. When Rodriguez called for additional volunteers, Marcus and Derek eagerly joined their friend, creating an opportunity for group techniques. The Marines demonstrated methods for managing multiple attackers, creating angles, maintaining space, using one attacker as a barrier against others. Emily observed closely, recognizing many of the principles Harrison had taught her years ago. The Marines' techniques were pragmatic, designed for real-world application rather than tournament competition or dojo sparring. Effective, direct, and adaptable to various situations, exactly the approach that proper law enforcement required. When the 3-on-1 demonstration ended, Ryan and his friends returned to their positions. Ryan's expression a mixture of respect for the Marines' skills and determination to prove himself superior to his classmates. His gaze swept the room, lingering momentarily on Emily with thinly disguised dismissal. Throughout the afternoon session, Emily maintained her carefully cultivated persona, participating when required, but never volunteering, performing adequately, but never exceptionally. Yet despite her efforts at invisibility, she noticed Corporal Stevens watching her with subtle interest during a partner drill on defensive stances. "Your base is naturally solid," he commented quietly as he passed, adjusting the positions of various students. "Have you had some training before?" "A little," Emily replied, deliberately weakening her stance slightly. "Self-defense basics in high school." Stevens nodded, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. He moved on to other students, but Emily felt his occasional glance returning to her throughout the remainder of the session. As the first day's training concluded, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez addressed the assembled students once more. "Today was an introduction. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll build on these fundamentals to develop a comprehensive understanding of tactical response appropriate for law enforcement situations. Tomorrow, we'll focus on verbal de-escalation paired with physical readiness." Dismissed. Students began gathering their things, conversations buzzing with impressions of the first session. Ryan and his group huddled together near the exit, their voices carrying deliberately. "Not bad for basics," Ryan was saying, loud enough to ensure others would hear. "I'm looking forward to when they get to the advanced stuff. Some people here might not be able to handle the intensity, but that's how you separate the real candidates from the wannabes." Emily packed her notebook methodically, ignoring the obvious baiting. She had almost reached the door when Ryan stepped directly into her path, forcing her to stop or collide with him. "So Reed," he said, his voice carrying the false friendliness that poorly masked contempt, "think you'll be able to keep up when things get serious? Criminal justice isn't just about taking notes, you know. Sometimes you actually have to speak up and take action." Emily met his gaze directly, her expression neutral. "I guess we'll find out." She moved to step around him, but Ryan shifted slightly, maintaining the blockade. "That's what I'm talking about, always trying to disappear. Real cops can't hide when things get tough." Marcus and Derek flanked him, creating a wall of hostile presence. The confrontation had drawn attention from nearby students, creating exactly the scene Emily had always worked to avoid. "Is there a problem here?" The voice belonged to Corporal Stevens, who had approached silently, a skill developed through years of combat operations. His expression revealed nothing, but his presence carried unmistakable authority. Ryan immediately adopted a more respectful demeanor. "No problem, sir. Just discussing the training with a classmate." Stevens looked between them, his assessment missing nothing. "Good to hear. Discussion and reflection are important parts of the learning process." His gaze lingered on Ryan momentarily. "As is respecting your fellow officers in training. Tomorrow's session begins at 0900 hours. Don't be late." As Stevens walked away, Ryan's expression hardened, but he stepped aside, allowing Emily to pass. She moved through the door without further engagement, aware that the interaction had changed something fundamental in her carefully maintained anonymity. She had become visible not only to Ryan and his group, but to the Marines as well, particularly Stevens, whose attention suggested he had recognized something in her that ordinary students wouldn't possess. Outside the gymnasium, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the campus. Emily walked toward the parking lot, mentally reviewing the day's events and calculating adjustments to her approach. The challenge was clear: maintain her cover through 2 weeks of training designed to reveal exactly the capabilities she was trying to conceal, while navigating the growing hostility from Ryan's group. In her car, Emily checked her phone, finding a text from Harrison. "How did it go?" Her reply was succinct. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez runs a professional program. One of his team may suspect my background. Ryan Thompson is becoming an issue." Harrison's response came quickly. "Rodriguez values discipline over dominance. Remember your training, sometimes the strongest current is the one that flows beneath the surface." Emily started her car, considering Harrison's metaphor. For 12 years, she had trained to be powerful, effective, capable of defending herself and others. For the past 2, she had hidden those capabilities beneath a carefully constructed persona of quiet invisibility. But as she drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that the coming days would force a choice between these two versions of herself, that the currents of her life were converging toward a moment of truth that would reveal which Emily Reed would ultimately emerge. The second day of the Marine training program began under a sky heavy with gathering storm clouds. Emily arrived at the gymnasium precisely 7 minutes before the scheduled start timing, carefully calculated to appear neither eager nor reluctant. She wore simple athletic clothes, black leggings, and a gray Silverwood college t-shirt chosen for functionality rather than attention. Students filtered in gradually, many showing the telltale signs of muscle soreness from yesterday's unfamiliar exercises. Conversations centered on impressions of the Marines and speculation about today's training focus. Emily took her position again, choosing the middle ground, not hiding at the very back, but not prominently placed near the front. Her notebook rested on her lap, pen ready, the picture of a diligent student. Ryan Thompson and his usual entourage arrived with the deliberate timing of those accustomed to making entrances. Ryan moved with exaggerated confidence, greeting other students with the casual superiority of someone who considered himself already in command. His gaze swept the room, briefly lingering on Emily with a dismissive smirk before he took his position front and center. At precisely 0900 hours, the Marines entered in formation. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez led, followed by his team in crisp desert camouflage, their bearing transforming the college gymnasium into a temporary extension of military discipline. "Today we focus on threat assessment and immediate response options," Rodriguez announced without preamble. "In law enforcement situations, your ability to quickly and accurately evaluate potential threats can mean the difference between resolving a situation peacefully and unnecessary escalation." He nodded to Corporal Stevens, who stepped forward to lead this segment. Emily felt a momentary tension. Stevens had shown particular interest in her form yesterday, noticing details other instructors had missed. "Threat assessment begins before any physical engagement." Stevens explained, his voice carrying the measured authority of someone who had faced real dangers. "It starts the moment you enter an environment or encounter an individual. Your ability to read body language, positioning, and behavioral indicators gives you critical seconds of advantage." The students were instructed to form a semicircle around the demonstration area. Stevens began walking them through the fundamentals of what he called tactical observation, the systematic evaluation of people and environments for potential threats. "Look for anomalies," he instructed. "Unusual positioning, inconsistencies between verbal and nonverbal communication, hands concealed or moving toward concealment areas. These aren't proof of threat, but indicators that warrant an increased vigilance." Emily participated with carefully calculated engagement, attentive but not exceptional, demonstrating basic competence without revealing the years she had spent studying these exact principles under Harrison's tutelage. When Stevens asked for volunteers to demonstrate threat identification scenarios, she deliberately avoided eye contact, ensuring others would be chosen first. Ryan's hand shot up immediately. "I'll volunteer, sir." Stevens nodded, positioning Ryan in the center of the demonstration area. "I'll create a series of scenarios with multiple potential threats. Your job is to identify the most immediate danger and verbalize your response priorities." He arranged 5 Marines in various positions around Ryan, each adopting different stances and behaviors. some obviously threatening, others more subtle. Ryan was instructed to scan the scene and identify which individual represented the primary threat. Ryan performed the exercise with better than average ability, correctly identifying the most obvious threats, but missing several of the more subtle indicators. Stevens provided professional feedback, acknowledging Ryan's strengths while pointing out his oversights. "You correctly identified the immediate physical threats," Stevens noted, "but you missed potential escalation indicators from seemingly non-threatening individuals. In real situations, the most dangerous person isn't always the most obvious." When the exercise concluded, Ryan returned to his position with the studied nonchalance of someone determined to appear unfazed by criticism. As he passed near Emily, he spoke just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "I think I've identified our biggest threat right here. She might bore us all to death with her silence." Several students chuckled, though a few looked uncomfortable with the open mockery. Emily maintained her composed expression, though internally she calculated the precise sequence of movements that would put Ryan on the mat in under 2 seconds. Instead, she simply opened her notebook and began writing observations, appearing to ignore the comment entirely. Stevens, however, had not missed the exchange. His gaze lingered briefly on Ryan, then shifted to Emily, noting her controlled response with professional interest. The morning session continued with increasingly complex threat assessment scenarios. Students were paired for role-playing exercises, with one acting as law enforcement and the other as a potential threat. Emily was paired with Sarah Wilson, the freshman she had helped yesterday. Sarah appeared nervous but grateful for the partnership. "I'm glad we're working together," Sarah whispered as they set up their scenario. "Some of the guys are taking this way too seriously, trying to show off." Emily offered a small, reassuring smile. "Just focus on the principles. This isn't about impressing anyone. It's about learning techniques that might save lives someday." Their scenario involved a traffic stop situation with uncertain threat levels. Emily deliberately held back during her turn as the officer, demonstrating textbook procedures without the intuitive threat assessment skills Harrison had drilled into her through countless similar exercises. When Sarah took her turn, Emily provided subtle guidance, helping her recognize key indicators without drawing attention. Stevens circulated among the pairs, offering corrections and commentary. When he reached Emily and Sarah, he observed silently for several minutes before commenting. "Good procedural discipline, Reed," he noted, "but you're hesitating at decision points. In real situations, that hesitation could be costly. Trust your instincts more." The irony wasn't lost on Emily. Her performance issues stemmed not from lack of instinct, but from deliberately suppressing the trained responses that would have revealed her true capabilities. "Yes, sir," she replied simply. "I'll work on that." Stevens studied her for a moment longer than necessary, his expression suggesting he was seeing something beyond her carefully constructed persona. Sometimes the quietest observers notice what others miss. Don't let self-doubt interfere with what your eyes are telling you. As he moved to the next pair, Emily recalibrated her performance. She needed to appear more natural in her development, showing appropriate improvement without revealing her actual skill level. The balancing act was becoming increasingly delicate. After a brief break, the afternoon session shifted focus to physical responses to identified threats. Gunnery Sergeant Collins took the lead, her commanding presence drawing immediate attention. "Once you've identified a threat, your response must be proportional, decisive, and tactically sound," Collins explained. "Today, we'll focus on creating distance and positioning for advantage techniques that allow you to control situations without immediate physical engagement." She demonstrated a series of movement patterns designed to maintain optimal distance from potential threats while establishing position of advantage. The techniques were foundational, creating angles using environmental features for cover, maintaining sight lines while minimizing exposure. Emily recognized these principles from years of Harrison's teaching. He had often emphasized that positional advantage was more important than physical technique. Put yourself in the right place and half the battle is already won. As students practiced these movements in pairs, Emily maintained her deliberately average performance, competent but unexceptional, showing appropriate effort without distinction. Yet despite her care, she noticed Stevens watching her periodically, his trained eye perhaps recognizing the natural ease with which she executed movements that others found challenging. Ryan continued his commentary throughout the afternoon, his remarks becoming increasingly pointed whenever instructors were out of earshot. "Some people here need to realize that real police work isn't for everyone," He announced to his circle during a water break, voice pitched to Carrie to where Emily stood. If you can't even speak up in class, how are you going to handle giving commands in crisis situations? Marcus and Derek nodded in agreement, glancing toward Emily with smirks of superiority. Other students showed mixed reactions, some uncomfortable with the targeted comments, others unwilling to challenge Ryan's social position within the program. Emily maintained her composed exterior, though her internal calculation of the social dynamics was precise. Ryan felt threatened by something about her, perhaps her academic success, perhaps her refusal to engage with his dominance displays. His increasing focus on her suggested she had become a symbolic challenge to his self-image as the natural leader of their cohort. The final segment of the day's training brought Gunnery Sergeant Collins front and center again. She stood before the assembled students, her posture reflecting years of military discipline. Before we conclude today, I want to address something fundamental about conflict response. Collins said, her steel-gray eyes scanning the group. In both military and law enforcement contexts, true strength isn't about dominating others through superior force. It's about achieving necessary objectives with appropriate means. She began walking slowly between the rows of students, her voice carrying with quiet authority. The most dangerous individuals I've encountered in combat zones weren't the loudest or most aggressive. They were the ones who remained calm, who observed carefully, who acted with precision rather than emotion. Her gaze swept across the students, momentarily resting on Emily before continuing. In real conflict situations, the winner isn't always the person who makes the most noise or displays the most aggression. Often it's the individual who can read the situation most accurately and respond most appropriately. Collins stopped directly in front of Ryan's group. Confidence is valuable. Arrogance gets people killed. Then she turned to looking directly at Emily. Just as self-doubt can prevent necessary action, the best officers find the balance, confident enough to act decisively, humble enough to assess accurately. As Collins concluded her remarks and the session ended, Emily gathered her things with methodical precision. The gunnery sergeant's comments had seemed almost personally directed, as if she had recognized both Ryan's excessive bravado and Emily's deliberate self-effacement. The Marines were proving more perceptive than Emily had anticipated. Outside the gymnasium, dark clouds had fulfilled their promise, and rain fell in steady sheets. Emily pulled up her hood, preparing to cross the parking lot to her car, when she noticed Sarah standing at the gymnasium entrance, looking uncertainly at the downpour. "I don't suppose you're headed toward the north dorms?" Sarah asked hopefully when she spotted Emily. "I can give you a ride," Emily offered, making a quick decision that balanced her desire for distance against the practical kindness. They dashed through the rain to Emily's car, quickly settling inside, as water streamed down the windows, creating a momentary cocoon of privacy. "Thanks for this," Sarah said, shaking droplets from her jacket. "And for yesterday, too. Marcus has been persistent since orientation week." Emily started the car, adjusting the defroster to clear the foggy windshield. "Ryan's group operates on intimidation. They target anyone they perceive as vulnerable." "Like you?" Sarah asked with surprising directness. "I've noticed how Ryan singles you out, but you don't seem intimidated, just contained." The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. Emily considered her response carefully as she navigated the rain-slicked campus roads. "There's a difference between being afraid and choosing not to engage," she finally said. "Some confrontations aren't worth the energy they consume." Sarah nodded slowly. "Is that why you're so quiet in classes? You're choosing not to engage." Emily felt a small smile form despite herself. "Something like that. But you know the material better than anyone," Sarah continued. "Professor Martinez mentioned that your midterm paper on procedural justice was the best he'd seen in years." This was unexpected information. Emily had deliberately avoided drawing attention to her academic performance. Professors shouldn't discuss student work with other students. "He didn't exactly announce it," Sarah clarified. "I was in his office hours getting help, and he mentioned your paper as an example of exceptional analysis. He didn't show it to me or anything." They arrived at the dormitory, rain still falling steadily. Emily put the car in park but kept the engine running, a subtle signal that their conversation had natural boundaries. "Why criminal justice?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Most people in the program are pretty vocal about wanting to be cops or federal agents, but you never talk about your goals." The question was precisely the kind Emily typically deflected, yet something about the rain-enclosed privacy of the car and Sarah's genuine curiosity prompted an unusually direct response. My parents were both police officers, Emily said. They taught me that true law enforcement isn't about power or authority, it's about protection and service. I want to continue that legacy. Sarah nodded, seeming to understand that she had been granted a rare glimpse behind Emily's usual reserve. Well, I think you'll be an amazing officer. And I hope Ryan Thompson isn't in the same department for everyone's sake. With a quick thank you, Sarah dashed through the rain into her dormitory, leaving Emily alone with thoughts she usually kept carefully compartmentalized. The conversation had been a small crack in the wall she had built between her private truth and public persona, not large but noticeable. First, the Marine's perceptiveness, now this unexpected connection with Sarah. The boundaries she had maintained were beginning to wear thin. As Emily drove home through the storm, her phone chimed with a message from Harrison. Coming by the dojo tonight, she pulled into a gas station considering her response. Training with Harrison would help center her, help maintain the discipline needed to navigate the increasingly complex situation at Silverwood. But it would also sharpen skills she was trying to conceal, creating a greater gap between her true capabilities and the persona she was projecting. Not tonight, she typed. Need to process the day. Marines are more observant than expected. Corporal Stevens suspects something. Harrison's reply came quickly. Stevens has combat experience in 3 theaters. He recognizes trained movement. Be careful tomorrow. Emily resumed her drive, the rain beating a steady rhythm on the roof of her car, a counterpoint to her thoughts. The carefully separated worlds of her life were drawing closer together, creating pressure that would eventually demand resolution. The question was no longer whether her true capabilities would be revealed, but when and under what circumstances. At her apartment, Emily changed into dry clothes and prepared a simple dinner. Rather than reviewing her criminal justice readings as planned, she found herself drawn to the leather-bound book Harrison had given her. She turned the weathered pages carefully, finding a passage marked with a faded ribbon. The true warrior knows when to reveal strength and when to conceal it. Neither choice is inherently right or wrong. The wisdom lies in understanding which serves the greater purpose in each moment. There is no honor in displaying power merely to dominate others. There is no shame in concealing power until it serves justice. Emily closed the book, the words resonating with her current dilemma. The Marines were teaching principles she already understood deeply. Ryan was creating conflicts she could easily resolve through her training. Yet her path required patience, required maintaining her careful balance despite increasing pressure from both sides. As she prepared for bed, Emily methodically reviewed the day's events, analyzing each interaction, each challenge, each moment when her mask had nearly slipped. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new pressures. She would need to adjust her approach, calibrate her responses even more carefully. Her final thought before sleep claimed her was a teaching Harrison had emphasized throughout her training. The strongest current flows beneath a still surface. Its power isn't diminished by its subtlety, it is enhanced by it. The library at Silverwood Community College had become Emily's sanctuary since her first semester. The quiet study area tucked behind the criminology section offered both privacy and strategic advantage. Few students ventured there, yet it provided clear sightlines to the main entrance and primary walkways. Today she had claimed her usual corner table reference materials, spread in neat arrangement as she reviewed legal precedents for her constitutional law assignment. The morning's Marine training session had focused on verbal de-escalation techniques paired with defensive positioning territory where Emily had been able to participate more naturally as these skills aligned with her academic knowledge rather than her martial training. Corporal Stevens had seemed less focused on her today, his attention drawn to students struggling with the concepts, allowing Emily to maintain her carefully calibrated middle ground performance. Now, in her midday break before afternoon classes, she sought the library's familiar quiet to regroup and prepare for what promised to be an increasingly challenging program. 3 days down, 11 to go each day, bringing more complex training that would test her ability to conceal her true capabilities. The sound of multiple footsteps broke her concentration. Looking up, she saw Ryan Thompson approaching, with Marcus and Derek flanking him like ceremonial guards. Their presence in this quiet section was deliberate. This wasn't their usual territory. Ryan pulled out the chair across from Emily and sat without invitation, leaning forward with exaggerated casualness. Marcus and Derek remained standing, positioned to block the view from the main library area, creating privacy that felt more threatening than considerate. "Read," Ryan began, his voice pitched low, but carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who enjoyed exercising power over others. "We need to have a conversation about your place in this program." Emily set down her pen carefully, maintaining neutral eye contact without response, neither challenging nor submissive, simply waiting. Ryan's expression tightened slightly at her lack of reaction. "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That silent treatment might work with professors who mistake it for deep thinking, but in the real world of law enforcement, it looks like weakness." Marcus nodded emphatically. "We all know she'll never make it as an actual cop. Can't even speak up in class discussions. Some people just aren't cut out for the job," Derek added with mock sympathy. "Better to realize it now than wash out of the academy later." Emily maintained her composed exterior while internally calculating options. Engagement would escalate the confrontation. Complete non-response would be interpreted as fear. The optimal approach lay somewhere between acknowledgement without full participation in their game. "Is there something specific you wanted to discuss about the program?" she asked, her voice calm and measured, revealing none of the tension coiling beneath her controlled surface. Ryan leaned back, a smile spreading that didn't reach his eyes. "Just looking out for my fellow students. My dad says police work is changing, too many people getting badges who can't handle the pressure when things get real. I'd hate to see someone get hurt because their backup froze under pressure." The implication was clear. He considered Emily unfit for their chosen profession, a liability rather than an asset. The irony would have been amusing under different circumstances, considering that her tactical training likely exceeded not only his, but possibly that of the academy instructors he would eventually encounter. "I appreciate your concern," Emily replied evenly, "but we all have our own paths through the program." Ryan's expression hardened, his facade of helpful colleague slipping to reveal the more authentic hostility beneath. "Here's the thing, Reed. Some of us have worked our whole lives for this career. We've trained, we've prepared, we've built the right mindset. And then there are people like you who barely speak, who hide in corners, who probably checked criminal justice on a form because nothing else seemed interesting." He leaned forward again, voice dropping further. "You're taking a spot that could go to someone who deserves it. Someone who's actually got what it takes to wear the badge." The conversation had crossed from casual intimidation into something more personally targeted. Emily felt a shift in her own internal state, not anger exactly, but a crystallization of awareness about Ryan's fundamental misunderstanding of what made an effective officer. His vision of policing centered on authority and dominance rather than protection and service. "What exactly does it take to wear the badge, Ryan?" she asked, her voice remaining steady but carrying a new note of genuine inquiry. "In your opinion?" The question seemed to catch him momentarily off balance. He had expected either continued passive response or defensive reaction, not direct engagement. "Confidence," he answered after a brief pause. "Strength, the ability to take control of situations. Decisiveness, the will to do what's necessary when things get tough." He gestured dismissively toward her. "Not hiding behind books and staying silent when real action is needed." Emily nodded once, acknowledging his perspective without agreeing with it. "Those can be important qualities. So can observation, judgment, restraint, understanding human psychology, and conflict de-escalation." Ryan's expression shifted toward derision. "That social worker approach gets officers killed. When someone's coming at you with a knife, all your understanding and de-escalation won't save you. And if your confidence in taking control turns a mental health call into a deadly force encounter," Emily countered, allowing a fraction more of her authentic voice to emerge, "every situation requires different tools. The best officers know which to use when." Marcus exchanged a glance with Derek, seemingly surprised by Emily's unexpected engagement. Ryan's expression darkened, his posture shifting subtly forward, classic prelude to escalation. "Look at you finally speaking up," he said, sarcasm dripping from each word. "Too bad it won't help you in the physical training coming up. What do you think will happen when the Marines start teaching actual defensive tactics? You think your book knowledge is going to help you then?" The question carried unintended irony that Emily allowed herself to appreciate internally while maintaining her composed exterior. If Ryan only knew what Harrison had taught her over 12 years of intensive training techniques that likely exceeded what the Marines would cover in their necessarily simplified 2-week program. "We all have different strengths to contribute," she replied diplomatically. Ryan snorted with derision. "Right, I'm sure the Marines will be really impressed by whatever your different strengths are." He stood abruptly, looming over the table in a final display of physical dominance. "Some advice: drop out before you embarrass yourself. This program isn't for everyone." As Ryan and his followers departed, Emily remained seated, outwardly calm, while processing the encounter with methodical precision. The confrontation represented a significant escalation, moving from casual mockery to direct challenge. Ryan clearly felt threatened by something about her, perhaps her academic success, or her refusal to acknowledge his self-appointed leadership position. More concerning was his fundamental misunderstanding of effective law enforcement, the belief that dominance and authority were the primary tools rather than judgment and proportional response. If his attitude reflected what his father had taught him, it represented exactly the approach to policing that created community distrust and unnecessary escalation. Emily gathered her materials and left the library, the encounter having disrupted her planned study session. Outside, spring sunshine had replaced yesterday's rain campus paths, busy with between-class foot traffic. She checked her phone, finding a text from Harrison that seemed almost prescient. "Remember that control comes in many forms. The loudest voice rarely carries the most wisdom." She typed a quick reply: "Confrontation with Ryan in library. Escalating situation. Will call later with details." The afternoon Marine session would begin in 40 minutes, enough time to center herself before facing the next challenge. Emily found a quiet bench in a less traveled corner of campus, sitting with perfect posture as she began the meditation, breathing Harrison had taught her years ago. 3 counts in 7 counts, out mind clearing of distractions, focus narrowing to the present moment and immediate needs. Harrison's voice echoed in her memory from an early training session. "Your greatest weapon isn't your fist or your foot, it's your capacity to remain calm when others lose control. In chaos, the centered mind prevails." By the time Emily entered the gymnasium for the afternoon session, her encounter with Ryan had been compartmentalized, acknowledged, but not controlling her focus. She noted Ryan and his group already positioned front and center, his posture conveying exaggerated confidence. Their earlier confrontation had clearly energized, rather than subdued him. Today's session brought a shift in focus as Gunnery Sergeant Collins took the lead position. The mats had been rearranged and protective gear was stacked nearby, clear indications that the training was moving into more physical territory. "This afternoon, we're focusing on escape and evasion techniques," Collins announced, her commanding presence drawing immediate attention. "In law enforcement situations, there are times when your priority isn't to subdue a threat, but to create distance and maintain your own safety, to reassess or call for backup." She gestured for the Marines to take positions around the demonstration area. "Today you'll learn foundational techniques for breaking various holds and creating distance from attackers. These are not offensive techniques, they're designed specifically for creating space and opportunity when at a tactical disadvantage." The practical emphasis resonated with Harrison's teaching. He had always stressed that true martial arts began with self-protection rather than aggression, the ability to create safety before considering counteraction. Collins demonstrated basic techniques for breaking common holds: wrist grabs, clothing grabs, bear hugs from behind. The mechanics were straightforward, emphasizing leverage and body mechanics rather than strength, making them practical for officers of any size or gender. Emily recognized most as simplified versions of techniques she had mastered years ago. "I need a volunteer to help demonstrate the proper application of these techniques," Collins announced. Ryan's hand shot up immediately, as Emily had anticipated. His earlier confrontation in the library seemed to have increased his determination to showcase his abilities. "Thompson front and center," Collins directed. Ryan stepped forward with studied confidence, positioning himself before the gunnery sergeant with the air of someone ready to impress. "I'll demonstrate how to escape from a front chokehold," Collins explained to the class. "Thompson will play the role of aggressor. Remember, these techniques rely on proper body mechanics, not raw strength." She positioned Ryan, instructing him on the proper application of a training chokehold, firm enough to be realistic, but controlled for safety. As Ryan applied the hold, Collins demonstrated the escape technique with precise efficiency, a combination of leverage against weak points in the grip body positioning to create mechanical advantage and explosive movement to create distance. Notice that I'm not trying to overpower my attacker, Collins explained as she repeated the demonstration at half speed. I'm using principles of physics and anatomy to create advantage despite potential size or strength disparities. After several demonstrations of increasingly complex escape techniques, Collins instructed the students to pair up and practice under supervision. Ryan volunteered to continue assisting with demonstrations, his physical confidence and athletic background making him a natural choice. Emily noted that despite his arrogance, he was performing the technical aspects, competently following instructions, and providing appropriate resistance for training purposes. As students broke into pairs, Emily found herself partnered with Sarah again, a pairing she suspected might not be coincidental. The Marines had been observing group dynamics carefully, perhaps recognizing the emerging connection between the two students. I'm nervous about the physical stuff, Sarah admitted quietly as they prepared to practice. I've never done any self-defense training before. Focus on the mechanics rather than the power, Emily advised, deliberately echoing Collins' instruction rather than Harrison's more advanced guidance. These techniques are designed to work regardless of size or strength advantages. They began practicing the basic escapes, Emily carefully calibrating her performance, competent enough to execute the techniques properly, but without the fluid precision that would reveal her years of training. She allowed small hesitations, minor adjustments after initial attempts, the natural learning curve of a student encountering these concepts for the first time. Collins circulated among the pairs, offering corrections and demonstrations as needed. When she reached Emily and Sarah, she observed silently for several minutes before commenting. Good attention to detail, Reed, she noted. You're focusing on the leverage points rather than muscling through. That's exactly right. She adjusted Emily's hand position slightly. Keep your center of gravity lower. It gives you more stability during the escape movement. Emily nodded, accepting the correction despite knowing the principle intimately from years of Harrison's training. Yes, ma'am. Collins watched them for another moment, her expression revealing professional assessment rather than simple observation. When you're ready, switch to standing wrist escapes. Both of you show good technical understanding. As Collins moved on, Sarah looked at Emily with newfound respect. She hardly corrected you at all. Everyone else is getting major adjustments. Emily shrugged, deflecting the observation. Just focusing on the mechanics, like she said. They continued practicing, Emily carefully maintaining her deliberate middle ground performance, not struggling noticeably but not executing with the unconscious fluidity her training would naturally produce. Yet despite her efforts, she noticed Stevens watching her periodically from across the room, his expression suggesting professional curiosity rather than casual observation. As the session progressed, Collins called the class back together for a final demonstration of more advanced escape techniques against multiple attackers. In real-world situations, you may face more than one threat simultaneously, she explained. The principles remain the same: create distance, maintain awareness, use positioning to prevent attackers from coordinating effectively. She called for 3 volunteers to assist with the demonstration. Ryan immediately stepped forward, followed by Marcus and Derek, their coordinated movement suggesting pre-discussion. Perfect, Collins said, positioning them around her in a triangle formation. You'll approach one at a time initially, then we'll demonstrate simultaneous threat response. The demonstration proceeded with professional precision, Collins showing how to manage multiple attackers through positioning, creating angles that prevented coordinated attacks using one attacker's position to block others. The techniques were practical and efficient, clearly drawn from real combat experience rather than theoretical training. Ryan and his friends participated properly, following Collins' instructions while clearly enjoying their central role in the demonstration. When the formal segment ended, Ryan remained near the front of the room, his posture and expression conveying satisfaction with his performance. Today's techniques are foundational, Collins told the assembled students. Tomorrow we'll build on these principles with more advanced applications specific to law enforcement scenarios. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will lead a comprehensive defensive tactics session that incorporates everything we've covered. As students began gathering their things, Ryan's voice rose above the general conversation pitched to carry across the gymnasium. Looking forward to seeing who can actually apply these techniques under pressure, he announced to his surrounding circle, though clearly intended for wider hearing. Some people might look good in slow-motion practice, but when things speed up, his gaze swept deliberately toward Emily. That's when you see who's really got what it takes, Umam. The comment hung in the air, its targeted nature obvious to anyone paying attention. Several students glanced between Ryan and Emily, discomfort visible in some expressions, while others seemed to enjoy the brewing conflict. The Marines maintained professional neutrality, though Emily caught a subtle exchange of glances between Stevens and Collins that suggested awareness of the underlying dynamics. Emily gathered her things methodically, refusing to be rushed by Ryan's implied challenge or the awkward atmosphere it created. As she prepared to leave, Sarah appeared beside her, voice low with concern. "Ryan's really got some issue with you," she observed. "It's getting weird how focused he is. People who need to prove their dominance usually target those who don't acknowledge it," Emily replied, zipping her bag with measured movements. "It's not personal, it's about his insecurity, not me." Sarah looked skeptical. "Seems pretty personal from where I'm standing. Are you going to be okay? He's recruiting people to his side. I overheard him telling people in the locker room that you think you're too good to participate fully in the program." The information was useful but not surprising. Ryan was escalating, moving from direct confrontation to social undermining. Emily had seen similar tactics throughout her academic career, attempts to isolate and pressure those who didn't conform to expected social hierarchies. "I'll be fine," Emily assured her. "Ryan's opinion of me isn't something I can control or something that particularly concerns me." They walked together toward the exit, Ryan and his group still lingering near the center of the gymnasium, their conversation punctuated with laughter that felt deliberately performative. "What about tomorrow?" Sarah asked. "If Rodriguez is doing advanced defensive tactics, you'll probably have to partner up with someone for demonstrations. What if you get stuck with Ryan?" The question highlighted a genuine tactical challenge. The progressive nature of the Marines program meant increasingly physical training with growing potential for Emily's true capabilities to be revealed, especially if directly challenged by someone like Ryan, whose confrontational approach might trigger instinctive responses honed through years of training. "I'll handle whatever comes," Emily said simply. Outside the gymnasium, late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across campus. Students dispersed toward dormitories. The library, the student center, normal college life, continuing around the small drama unfolding within the criminal justice program. As they reached the parking lot, Emily's phone chimed with a text from Harrison. "Dojo tonight might help clear your head." The invitation was tempting. Training with Harrison always centered her, restored her focus and perspective. But tonight it carried risk, reinforcing muscle memory and reflexes she was actively suppressing during the Marine program. "Rain check," she replied. "Need to process and adjust approach for tomorrow." Harrison's response came quickly. "Understood. Remember, the strongest warriors know when to reveal strength and when to conceal it. Neither choice defines you." Emily drove home in thoughtful silence, mentally reviewing the escalating situation. Ryan's confrontation in the library had marked a significant shift from general mockery to specific targeting. His behavior suggested he perceived her as a threat to his self-image, as the program's natural leader, despite her deliberate efforts to remain unnoticed. Meanwhile, the Marines, particularly Stevens and Collins, seemed increasingly aware that something about her performance didn't align with her capabilities. Their professional experience allowed them to recognize the subtle indicators of trained movement and awareness that Emily couldn't entirely conceal despite her careful modulation. The converging pressures created an unstable dynamic. Ryan pushing for confrontation, the Marines watching with professional curiosity, Emily trying to maintain her carefully constructed middle ground, a position that grew more precarious with each passing day. At home, Emily prepared a simple dinner and reviewed her notes from the day's training. The techniques Collins had demonstrated were familiar, basic versions of more advanced applications Harrison had taught years ago. Tomorrow would bring more complex scenarios, more physical engagement, more opportunities for her training to reveal itself through instinctive response. Before bed, Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, engaging in the meditation practice Harrison had taught her for centering and mental clarity. Her breathing slowed her mind, clearing of distractions, focusing on the essential question before her. How long should she maintain the fiction of average capability when circumstances increasingly demanded authentic response. Harrison's book lay open beside her, a passage marked with his characteristic underline. The true measure of a warrior is not in victory over others, but in victory over oneself, the discipline to act according to principle rather than impulse, to serve greater purpose rather than personal pride. Emily closed her eyes, finding her center in the quiet of her apartment. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever challenges Ryan created, whatever the Marines observed, she would navigate with the discipline and clarity Harrison had instilled through years of rigorous training. The path forward might not be the one she had planned, but she would walk it with the same precision and purpose that defined everything else in her life. The question was no longer whether her true capabilities would be revealed, but how and when, and whether that revelation would serve her ultimate goals or undermine them. Dawn broke over Silverwood with the crisp clarity that often follows days of tension. Emily Reed stood at her apartment window, watching early light transform the world outside. She had slept little, her mind processing possibilities, calculating scenarios, preparing for what the third day of Marine training might bring. Today would feature advanced defensive tactics under Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, techniques closer to Emily's true expertise, creating greater risk of revealing capabilities she had carefully concealed. Combined with Ryan's escalating hostility, the situation had reached a critical threshold. Her phone chimed with a text from Harrison. "Trust your judgment today. Whatever decision you make it for the right reasons." The message carried deeper meaning than its simple words, Harrison recognizing the crossroads Emily faced. After 12 years of training under his guidance, he understood her capabilities better than anyone. He also understood her careful balance between strength and restraint, the discipline that defined her approach to both martial arts and life. Emily prepared methodically for the day ahead, her movements precise and efficient qualities ingrained through years of training. She selected clothes that would allow full range of movement while maintaining her understated appearance. Black athletic pants, a simple gray t-shirt, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Nothing that suggested special preparation. Nothing that drew attention. As she drove to campus, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the frightened 8-year-old who first entered Harrison's dojo to the skilled martial artist she had become. From the quiet transfer student at Silverwood to the focused criminal justice major with clear career goals. Two paths that had remained carefully separate until now converging toward an inevitable intersection. The gymnasium had been transformed for today's session. The central floor was covered with impact-absorbing mats. Equipment racks held protective gear, headgear, gloves, body padding. A medical kit stood open nearby, its contents arranged with military precision, preparation for the more physical training ahead. Students arrived in groups, conversation focused on speculation about today's advanced techniques. Ryan and his followers claimed their usual prominent position, their demeanor conveying eager anticipation rather than the apprehension evident in some other students. Emily took her place on the bleachers, maintaining her deliberate middle ground positioning, neither hiding at the margins nor seeking central attention. She noticed several students watching her with new interest, likely influenced by Ryan's campaign of comments and criticism. The social dynamics were shifting, creating currents of expectation that hadn't existed before. Precisely at EO 900, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez entered, followed by his team in their desert camouflage uniforms. Their bearing transformed the college gymnasium into an extension of military discipline as it had each day. "Today we escalate to advanced defensive techniques," Rodriguez announced without preamble. "In law enforcement situations, you may encounter resistance that requires more decisive physical response. The techniques we'll cover are specifically designed for control and restraint, not punishment or domination." He emphasized this last point with particular intensity, his gaze sweeping across the assembled students. "The objective is never to harm unnecessarily, but to create safety for yourself or bystanders. And yes, even for the subject you are restraining." Rodriguez gestured to the protective gear. "Today's training will involve controlled contact. Safety is paramount. We'll demonstrate each technique at partial speed before you practice with partners." The students were instructed to form a semicircle around the central mat area. Rodriguez and Corporal Stevens took positions in the center, demonstrating basic restraint techniques, wrist controls, joint locks, takedowns designed to immobilize without injury. Each movement was executed with precise control, their explanations emphasizing the mechanical principles rather than raw force. Notice that effective technique doesn't require superior strength, Rodriguez explained as Stevens successfully restrained him despite their size difference. It requires proper body mechanics timing and tactical awareness. Emily observed with focused attention, recognizing most techniques as basic versions of more advanced applications Harrison had taught. The Marines were providing excellent instruction, practical, efficient movements adaptable to various situations officers might encounter. When Rodriguez called for volunteers to demonstrate the techniques, Ryan's hand shot up immediately as Emily had anticipated. His eagerness to showcase his athletic abilities was a predictable part of his ongoing campaign to establish dominance within the group. Thompson stepped forward, Rodriguez directed, and we need one more volunteer for a two-on-one demonstration. Before any other hands could rise, Ryan spoke up. How about Reed? Let's see how the quiet one handles pressure. The suggestion created an immediate ripple through the assembled students. Some looked uncomfortable with the obvious targeting, others showed interest in how Emily would respond. The Marines maintained professional neutrality, though Stevens and Collins exchanged a brief glance that suggested awareness of the underlying dynamics. Rodriguez turned toward Emily, his expression revealing nothing beyond professional assessment. Reed, would you be willing to assist with the demonstration? Emily felt time slow momentarily as she calculated options. Declining would reinforce Ryan's narrative about her unsuitability for law enforcement challenges. Accepting meant engaging directly in physical techniques she had been carefully moderating. Either choice carried significant implications for her carefully maintained cover. Yes, sir, she replied, simply rising from her position with measured calm. As Emily approached the demonstration area, she felt the weight of focused attention from Ryan, whose expression mixed satisfaction with challenge. From the Marines, whose professional assessment missed nothing. From fellow students whose expectations had been shaped by weeks of Ryan's commentary. We'll demonstrate defensive response against multiple attackers, Rodriguez explained as Emily took position beside him. Thompson and Reed will approach with controlled aggression. I'll demonstrate techniques for managing simultaneous threats. Ryan moved into position with confident swagger, while Emily adopted the stance of a reasonably athletic student with basic training, competent but unremarkable. She noted Stevens watching her positioning with particular attention, perhaps recognizing the deliberate quality of her seemingly average stance. Begin, Rodriguez commanded. Ryan launched forward immediately with aggressive energy, while Emily advanced with calculated hesitation, the movement of someone following instructions rather than acting from trained instinct. Rodriguez handled their approach with professional efficiency, using positioning and timing to neutralize both simultaneously, despite their coordinated attack. Notice that I'm creating angles that prevent my attackers from coordinating effectively, Rodriguez explained to the watching students. Position is often more important than technique when handling multiple threats. They repeated the demonstration several times with variations, Rodriguez explaining principles of tactical movement, center of gravity control, and efficient response. Throughout, Emily maintained her carefully calibrated performance, showing basic competence without the fluid precision her years of training would naturally produce. As the demonstration concluded, Rodriguez addressed the class. Now we'll move to partner practice. Each pair will work through the techniques we've demonstrated, alternating roles between officer and subject. Emily moved to return to her position, but Ryan's voice interrupted. Staff Sergeant, I think we should demonstrate more realistic scenarios. Most criminals won't just stand there waiting to be restrained. Rodriguez considered the suggestion with professional assessment. You're raising a valid point about resistance. However, safety remains our priority in this training environment. What about a controlled sparring demonstration? Ryan pressed. Show how these techniques apply against active resistance. I volunteer to participate. The proposal carried clear subtext, Ryan seeking opportunity to showcase his abilities, perhaps create situations where others, particularly Emily, might appear less capable. His glance in her direction confirmed the targeted nature of his suggestion. Rodriguez exchanged looks with his team, a silent professional communication that suggested evaluation of both the training value and the underlying dynamics. A demonstration of technique application against resistance could be instructive, Rodriguez acknowledged, but it would require participants with sufficient training to maintain safety protocols. Ryan straightened with confident anticipation. I've trained in wrestling and MMA for 6 years. I can handle it. Rodriguez nodded once, then turned to the assembled students. We'll demonstrate application against active resistance, but I'll need someone with comparable training background to ensure safety. His gaze swept the group, briefly resting on Emily before continuing. Several students shifted uncomfortably, none volunteering for what promised to be a physically challenging demonstration against Ryan's athletic background. The moment stretched, tension building as Rodriguez waited. Emily felt the weight of multiple attention. Ryan's challenging stare, the Marine's professional assessment, fellow students' uncertain expectations. The crossroads Harrison had foreseen had arrived more quickly than anticipated, presenting a choice with no middle ground. With deliberate calm, Emily raised her hand. "I'll volunteer, Staff Sergeant." The gymnasium fell silent. Ryan's expression shifted from surprise to satisfaction, clearly believing he had maneuvered her into a situation that would expose her limitations. Other students exchanged glances. Uncertainty mixed with curiosity about how the quiet, reserved Emily would perform against Ryan's obvious physical confidence. "Are you certain, Reed?" Rodriguez asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes assessing. "This will involve active physical engagement." Emily met his gaze directly. "Yes, sir, I understand the parameters." Something in Rodriguez's expression suggested he recognized more than her simple acknowledgement, perhaps sensing the disciplined capability she had carefully concealed. He nodded once, gesturing for both Emily and Ryan to move to the center mat. "Protective gear first," he instructed, directing them to the equipment rack where Corporal Stevens was already selecting appropriate padding. "Safety remains paramount, even in demonstration." As they donned protective headgear and gloves, Ryan leaned toward Emily with confident smugness. "Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of everyone." Emily adjusted her headgear without response, her focus narrowing to the immediate situation. The decision had been made, now came execution with appropriate control. She would need to demonstrate sufficient skill to counter Ryan effectively while still maintaining plausible limits to her capabilities. Rodriguez positioned them on the mat, addressing the watching students. "This demonstration will illustrate how the techniques we've covered apply against active resistance. Both participants will maintain control. This is about tactical application, not competition." He turned to Emily and Ryan. "Begin when ready. Remember safety protocols." Ryan settled into a wrestler's stance, his confidence evident in his relaxed but ready posture. Emily adopted a basic defensive stance, functional, but deliberately lacking the refined precision of her actual training. She noticed Stevens and Collins watching with particular attention, their experienced eyes likely recognizing subtle details in her positioning. For a moment, neither moved, Ryan clearly expecting Emily to react nervously, Emily waiting with the patience Harrison had instilled through thousands of hours of training. The gymnasium remained silent, attention focused entirely on the center mat. Ryan moved first, lunging forward with surprising speed for his size, attempting to close distance for a grappling takedown. Emily sidestepped with calculated efficiency, not the fluid precision her training would naturally produce, but effective enough to evade his initial attack. Ryan recovered quickly, circling with growing intensity. His next approach combined feinted strikes with another takedown attempt. Emily blocked and redirected with measured competence, applying the basic techniques Rodriguez had demonstrated earlier, effective but unexceptional. "Use your positioning," Rodriguez instructed from the sidelines. "Control the engagement range." Ryan pressed forward with increasing determination, his expression hardening as Emily continued to defend effectively against his attacks. What had begun as confident assurance of easy victory was transforming into frustrated intensity as his expected dominance failed to materialize. "Stop dancing around," Ryan muttered, loud enough for Emily to hear but not the observers. "Fight back if you've got what it takes." Emily maintained her disciplined focus, defending against his increasingly aggressive approaches while calculating the appropriate level of counter-response. She needed to demonstrate legitimate capability without revealing the full extent of her training, a delicate balance under mounting pressure. As the demonstration continued, Ryan's frustration became increasingly evident. His movements grew more forceful, his techniques less controlled, competitive instinct overriding the training parameters. When his next takedown attempt failed, his follow-up strike carried more force than appropriate for demonstration purposes. Emily deflected the strike and created distance, maintaining her composed focus despite the escalation. She caught Rodriguez's narrowed gaze, the staff sergeant clearly noting the shift in Ryan's approach, but allowing the demonstration to continue under careful observation. "Remember control," Rodriguez called out, the reminder clearly directed at Ryan, though delivered to both participants. Ryan nodded acknowledgement but pressed forward with renewed determination, his expression revealing growing frustration that Emily continued to defend effectively against his attacks. What had begun as an anticipated showcase of his superiority had become an unexpected challenge to his self-image. "Enough warming up," Ryan said through clenched teeth audible only to Emily. "Let's see how you handle real pressure." His next sequence came with significantly increased intensity, a combination that dropped any pretense of demonstration purpose, designed instead to overwhelm through superior aggression and strength. The shift crossed the boundary from training exercise to genuine confrontation, revealing Ryan's true character when challenged. Emily recognized the transition immediately. She had reached the decision point Harrison had prepared her for throughout years of training, the moment when discipline required appropriate rather than minimal response. With calm clarity, she adjusted her approach accordingly. As Ryan launched his aggressive combination, Emily responded with precise defensive movement, not the carefully moderated performance of previous exchanges, but the authentic application of trained skill. Her positioning shifted subtly, her timing calibrated to the millisecond, her balance centered with the stability of thousands of practice hours. Ryan's attack met empty space as Emily redirected his momentum with textbook precision, using his forward drive to unbalance him while establishing superior position. When he attempted to recover with a wild counterstrike, she trapped his arm in a fluid control technique, transitioning seamlessly into a joint lock that brought him to the mat with controlled efficiency. The gymnasium fell completely silent. The entire exchange had lasted less than 5 seconds, yet had revealed what years of careful concealment had hidden Emily's exceptional capability in Ryan's fundamental limitations. Ryan stared up at Emily with shocked disbelief, his expression cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and dawning recognition. She released the control hold immediately once he was stabilized, stepping back with the disciplined restraint Harrison had emphasized throughout her training. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, his professional expression revealing nothing of his assessment. "Good demonstration of control technique against resistance. Thompson Reed well executed." Emily returned to her starting position, maintaining composed focus despite the electric tension now filling the gymnasium. Students stared with varying expressions: surprise, reassessment, newfound respect. Ryan stood slowly, his usual confidence shattered by the unexpected revelation of Emily's true capabilities. "That was unexpected," Rodriguez continued, addressing the watching students, "and instructive. Notice how Reed maintained defensive focus until precise response was necessary. Minimum effective force applied with maximum control. These are foundational principles in both military and law enforcement contexts." He gestured for Emily and Ryan to remove their protective gear. Ryan complied mechanically, his expression suggesting internal recalibration of everything he had assumed about the quiet student he had dismissed for months. "Before we continue with partner practice," Rodriguez said, turning to Emily, "perhaps Reed would be willing to demonstrate these principles more comprehensively. Your technique suggests prior training." The question carried professional respect rather than challenge, recognition of capability rather than demand for explanation. Emily felt the weight of the moment, understanding that her response would define her path forward. "Yes, sir," she acknowledged simply. "I've trained in martial arts since childhood." Rodriguez nodded, his expression suggesting this confirmed rather than revealed information. "Would you be comfortable demonstrating defensive techniques against multiple opponents? It would provide valuable perspective for your classmates." The request represented complete departure from Emily's carefully maintained anonymity, yet somehow felt like returning to authenticity rather than losing concealment. Harrison's voice echoed in her mind. "True strength knows when to remain hidden and when to reveal itself. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference." "I would, sir," Emily replied with quiet confidence. "How many opponents did you have in mind?" Rodriguez exchanged glances with his team, a silent professional communication that suggested mutual recognition of Emily's true capabilities. "Corporal Stevens, Sergeant Williams, and Lance Corporal Johnson will provide appropriately challenging resistance." The implication was clear. Rodriguez recognized that Emily's training level warranted professional rather than student opposition. 3 Marines would provide legitimate demonstration value while acknowledging her evident skill level. As the designated Marines moved into position around Emily, students shifted forward on the bleachers, attention completely focused on this unexpected development. Ryan had retreated to the sidelines, his usual entourage maintaining unusual silence as they processed this fundamental shift in their understood social hierarchy. Standard safety protocols, Rodriguez instructed his team, controlled engagement, demonstrating defensive principles against multiple opponents. Emily centered herself in the demonstration space, settling into her natural stance, no longer concealing the balanced precision that 12 years of Harrison's training had instilled. She felt an unexpected sense of liberation in this moment of revelation, the freedom of authenticity after years of careful restraint. Begin when ready, Rodriguez directed. The Marines approached with professional coordination, their movements revealing their own extensive combat training. Unlike Ryan's aggressive but undisciplined attacks, they moved with tactical precision, creating angles, cutting off escape routes, coordinating their approach to maximize pressure. Emily responded with the authentic application of her training, no longer moderating her performance to appear average, but demonstrating the true capabilities she had developed under Harrison's guidance. Her movements flowed with disciplined precision as she managed the coordinated attack, creating defensive angles, maintaining tactical awareness, applying precise counters when appropriate. Within 30 seconds, she had successfully neutralized all three Marines using controlled techniques, joint locks, momentum, redirection, tactical positioning, each applied with the precision that came from thousands of practice repetitions. Not a single movement wasted, not a single response excessive. The gymnasium erupted in spontaneous applause. Students who had barely noticed Emily for 2 years now stared in amazement at the revelation of her true capabilities. The Marines picked themselves up with professional acknowledgement, nodding respect for her evident skill. Exceptional demonstration, Rodriguez stated simply. Reed, where did you receive your training? I've studied Northern Shaolin Kung Fu and Wing Chun for 12 years, under Colonel Martin Harrison, former Delta Force. Emily replied, no longer concealing her background. Recognition flashed in Rodriguez's eyes at Harrison's name. Harrison was my tactical instructor during cross-training at Fort Bragg, one of the finest combat specialists I've ever encountered. He turned to the watching students. You've just witnessed the application of principles we've been discussing: disciplined response, tactical awareness, appropriate force application executed at an advanced level. As the session continued with partner practice, Emily found herself in an entirely new position, no longer the invisible student, but a recognized resource. Rodriguez assigned her to assist with technique correction, acknowledging her expertise while maintaining the Marines' instructional authority. Throughout the remainder of the session, Emily felt subtle but profound shifts in the gymnasium's social dynamics. Students who had previously ignored her now approached with questions and respect. Ryan and his group maintained noticeable distance, their usual dominance display replaced by uncomfortable reassessment. When the session concluded, Rodriguez approached Emily privately. Harrison mentioned you when we coordinated this program. Said I should watch for a promising student with exceptional potential. He smiled slightly at Emily's surprised expression. He didn't identify you, specifically said you'd reveal yourself if and when appropriate. Emily absorbed this information, recognizing Harrison's careful guidance, providing opportunity without forcing revelation, trusting her judgment about when authenticity served her purpose better than concealment. Thank you for the demonstration today, Rodriguez continued. It provided valuable perspective for your classmates, particularly about assumptions and appearances. His glance toward Ryan carried clear meaning. As students filed out, Emily gathered her things with methodical precision, processing the significant shift in her college experience. The careful separation between her training life and academic persona had dissolved integration rather than compartmentalization would define her path forward. Sarah approached her expression, mixing amazement with newfound understanding. That was incredible. Why didn't you ever say anything about your training? Emily considered her response carefully. Some capabilities are better demonstrated than discussed, and sometimes the right moment for revelation only becomes clear when it arrives. Outside the gymnasium, afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the campus quad. Emily walked toward the parking lot, aware of changed attention from passing students. Word of her demonstration had spread quickly through typical college communication channels. Her phone chimed with a text from Harrison. Rodriguez called, said you made the right decision at the right moment for the right reason. That's what all the training was ultimately for. Emily smiled slightly, recognizing the truth in Harrison's message. The discipline of martial arts had never been primarily about combat technique. It had been about developing judgment, about knowing when restraint served better than power and when authenticity served better than concealment. As she reached her car, she noticed Ryan Thompson waiting nearby, his usual entourage conspicuously absent. His posture suggested internal conflict rather than the aggressive confidence he typically projected. "Reed," he called as she approached. "Can we talk for a minute?" Emily assessed his demeanor, detecting genuine discomfort rather than tactical positioning. She nodded once, waiting with the patience Harrison had instilled through years of training. Ryan struggled visibly with words that didn't come easily to him. "That was impressive in there. I didn't expect, I assumed." He stopped, frustration with his own inarticulateness evident. "You assumed what you saw was all that existed," Emily supplied calmly. "Yeah." Ryan nodded, relief at her understanding evident. "I was wrong about you. Wrong about a lot of things, I guess." The admission clearly cost him considerable effort, challenging foundational aspects of his self-image. "We all have misconceptions," Emily replied. "What matters is how we respond when they're revealed." Ryan considered this something shifting in his expression, the beginning of genuine reflection rather than defensive reaction. "My dad always said strength means dominating situations, being the one in charge. But what you did in there, it wasn't about domination. It was about control, including self-control." The observation revealed unexpected insight, suggesting potential beneath Ryan's practiced arrogance. "True strength isn't about power over others," Emily said, echoing Harrison's teaching. "It's about mastery of oneself." Ryan nodded slowly, absorbing the concept with visible effort. "I've got some thinking to do about a lot of things." He extended his hand with awkward formality. "No hard feelings." Emily accepted the gesture with appropriate response, neither excessive enthusiasm nor lingering resentment. Clean slate moving forward. As Ryan walked away, his posture reflecting unfamiliar humility, Emily recognized that her revelation had created ripple effects beyond her own circumstances, challenging others to reconsider their assumptions and approaches. 1 week later, Harrison's dojo hummed with evening activity. Junior students practiced basic forms under Emily's guidance, her instructions calm and precise, as she corrected stances and demonstrated techniques. The respect in their attentive faces reflected not just her technical skill, but the confident authority with which she now shared her knowledge. Harrison observed from his customary position at the edge of the training floor, his weathered face revealing subtle satisfaction. When the junior class concluded and the students bowed out, he approached Emily with unhurried steps. "Your teaching has improved," he noted simply. Emily smiled, a genuine expression that came more easily these days. "I had a good teacher." "How are things at Silverwood?" Harrison asked, though his connections with Rodriguez meant he likely already knew the answer. "Different," Emily replied. "Not better or worse, just more authentic." Harrison nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her assessment. They walked together toward his office, the familiar surroundings now carrying a new sense of shared purpose rather than hierarchical division. "Rodriguez tells me you have been helping with the advanced techniques," Harrison said. "Says you have a natural talent for instruction. Students respond well to your approach." "It's strange," Emily acknowledged. "For 2 years I worked to be invisible, and now I'm voluntarily standing in front of groups explaining techniques I used to hide." "That's the difference between concealment driven by fear and strategic restraint guided by purpose," Harrison observed. "One diminishes, the other preserves until the right moment." Emily considered this distinction, recognizing its truth. "I've been thinking about what comes next, after graduation." Harrison waited, giving her space to continue in her own time, a patience that had characterized his teaching approach from the beginning. "I still want to join the police force," Emily said, "but I'm considering specializing in training, using what I've learned to help officers develop better judgment about force application, not just technical skills." Harrison's slight smile suggested approval without saying it directly. "The world has enough people who know how to apply force. It needs more who understand when not to." "That's what you've been teaching me all along, isn't it?" Emily asked. "Not just how to fight, but how to know when fighting isn't the answer." "The techniques are just tools," Harrison confirmed. "The wisdom to use them appropriately, that's the true discipline." They reached his office door, where Harrison paused, studying her with the evaluative gaze that had once seemed intimidating, but now felt like recognition between equals. "You've completed the circle," he said simply. from student to practitioner to teacher. That's the true path of mastery. 2 months later, Emily stood before a classroom of police cadets at the Regional Training Academy. Her uniform was crisp, her posture confident, without being imposing, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came from deep knowledge rather than projected power. Today we're going to discuss proportional response. She began scanning the attentive faces before her. Not just the legal requirements, but the practical and ethical dimensions. In the back row sat Ryan Thompson, his expression serious and focused, as he took detailed notes. His acceptance into the academy had come with provisional status, a consequence of academic borderline performance rather than physical limitations. His path would be challenging, but Emily had supported his application with a letter highlighting his capacity for growth and self-reflection. As Emily moved through her presentation, she recognized many of the lessons Harrison had taught her, over 12 years now translated into the specific context of law enforcement. The principles remained the same: discipline over impulse protection, over dominance, awareness over assumption. The most critical decisions you'll make won't be about how much force to use, she told the cadets. They'll be about whether force is necessary at all. Your most powerful weapon isn't your firearm or your physical training, it's your judgment. After class, as cadets filed out with thoughtful expressions, Emily gathered her materials with the same methodical precision that characterized everything she did. Her phone displayed a message from Harrison: graduation ceremony this Saturday. 6 new black belts, your students from last year. They're hoping their first instructor will be there. Emily smiled as she typed her reply, wouldn't miss it. Her path had come full circle, from the frightened child learning to protect herself to the confident instructor helping others develop not just capability, but wisdom. The quiet girl who had once sought invisibility had found something more valuable: the ability to be seen for who she truly was, and to help others see themselves more clearly as well. The strength Harrison had helped her develop had never been primarily about combat techniques or physical dominance. It had been about integration, bringing together capability and restraint, power and responsibility, confidence and humility into a coherent whole that served a greater purpose than self-protection or personal advancement. As Emily left the academy building, afternoon sunlight caught her shadow on the pavement, strong, balanced, unmistakable. No longer hiding, no longer divided, but fully present in her purpose and path forward. The journey that had begun with a frightened 8-year-old girl facing her fears had led to a woman who understood that true strength wasn't defined by power over others, but by mastery of oneself in service to something greater.